Tonight's class is on the work of the fellowship, which is working with the three levels of consciousness, the metaphysical approach to the field of consciousness, which is the work, that primary work that Wayne and Bella do here during the week. And many, many people, thousands of people have come to the fellowship seeking answers to situations within their lives, looking to understand the mysteries of life. Many of them opening themselves to the concepts of reincarnation and karma, and accepting the notion or the belief that we've lived many, many lives and probably will live many, many lives in the future. And the purpose being to evolve into higher and higher forms of awareness. And this is the work that we will be talking about tonight. And Wayne and Bella will be leading the discourse. But before we go into that, let's just set the vibration for tonight's session. And the way we do that is we join together in prayer to set up a common vibration. Will you join me in the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we have forgiven those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And now, if you'll just follow me silently, I'll move through a universal prayer, which we call a universal prayer of protection. Father, Mother, God, we ask that each one present and those yet to come, and these premises be completely cleared and cleansed within the universal white Christ light, the green healing light, and the purple transmuting flame. Within God's will and for our highest good, we ask that any and all negativity and or evil be completely sealed in its own light, encapsulated in the ultraviolet light, cut off and removed from us. Impersonally, with neither love nor hate, we return all negativity or evil to its source of emanation, decreeing it never again be allowed to reestablish itself within us, our premises, or anyone else ever again. We ask that each of us, and those yet to come, and our premises be placed within a triple sealed capsule by the universal white Christ light of protection, and for these blessings we give our thanks. And now let's each of us just sit quietly, placing ourselves within a very relaxed state, calming our minds, seeing ourselves placed within balance and harmony. And just place ourselves within this consciousness for a few moments. I'd like to turn the program over to Dr. Guthrie.
Thank you, Bill. As I look out over the crowd this evening, I realize that the majority of you have not had a Three Selves evaluation, and that some of you have very little understanding of our particular approach to the Three Selves work, or the field of consciousness, is represented by the chart. Now, we have some charts to pass out for those of you who might want to, so you won't need to try to copy down the chart, but just use it as a reference if you need to. Thank you. We're going to spend the bulk of the evening tonight with EC doing some research work on the Three Selves work. Now, this can go into any area, but I realize that we're going to need to give you some background in order that we can in turn expect questions from you. The key to our work here at the fellowship lies in the area of the subconscious mind, or what we within the school of thought call the basic self, or selves. It's very important to realize that most of us, if not all of us, have two basic selves making up the subconscious mind. Perhaps not both of the basic selves are active at this particular time within your lives. That is to say that maybe one or the other, whether it be the male or the female, is active because it needs a certain amount of learning or experience. And the other one is sort of coasting along for a period, learning by osmosis, but not actively involved insofar as being inside you as individuals. The purpose, of course, of the work that we do is to bring about an integration, to bring about an awareness on your part that you have help from within. How many of you need help?
The question is, who doesn't?
The question is, who doesn't? That's exactly right. Because obviously, if you accept the fact that we're here within karmic patterns, and then we have lessons to learn, then there's work to be done. The process, of course, is to bring about as high a level of accomplishment within the subconscious mind of the basic self as is possible. Now, some of you might not be aware of the fact that the subconscious mind has a tremendous amount of free will. As a matter of fact, the subconscious mind, the basic self, can accept or reject the karmic pattern within their own free will. They can accept or reject your body, your physical body. Accept or reject the Godhead, or the theory of a creative source. Some people have a feeling of not believing in God, for instance. Well, that generally comes from the basic self. The basic self, for some reason or another, in this particular lifetime, has chosen not to be part of that particular belief system. There are many, many belief systems, and we've all been part of these belief systems, just as we've all been part of many, many bodies, different kinds of bodies, male, female bodies, Oriental, black, Indian. We've all been in and out of these many, many bodies. And we have learned, hopefully, as a result of this, but the fact still remains that the basic self has the free will to accept or reject God if it chooses. There's one thing Abel and I have learned in our good many years of work now, and that is that what is truth for one is not necessarily truth for another. In the early days, we spent a great deal of time working in what we call rescue work. I don't know whether you've ever thought about this or not, but the world is very populated with disincarnate entities. By that I mean spirit forms, as you and I are spirit, that have no bodies of their own to work through or operate through or express through. Now that might be as a result of the attitude or the emotion that they were involved with at the time of death or transition. For instance, just recently we had 37 young men who were killed for the most part instantly as a result of the bombing of one of our planes over the Persian Gulf. Now, you see, those individuals were not prepared for that transition. It's not as if they had been lingering in a hospital for a while and been told by their doctor that the chances perhaps were not so good, that transition might be a possibility. It wasn't that at all. It was simply the fact that one moment they're living and breathing and expressing and the next moment they're either dead or in the process of dying. Now that's quite a shock to the subconscious mind, even though the subconscious mind, the basic self, might well have had an understanding or an inkling that that was going to be occurring, because for the most part there are no accidents. And we would say, well, now why out of all of those sailors on that particular ship were those 37 called out and killed as a result of that action? Well, perhaps their karma drew them into that kind of an action. The point that I'm making, however, is that the attitude that they had when they left the body, when the spirit left the body and the subconscious minds, the basic selves, peeled off, is very important, because it is that that oftentimes will bring an individual back into a new expression. So in our early work, we were seeking to release many who are earthbound, were at that time, and many are still earthbound. For instance, we have supposedly 6 million Jews who lost their lives during World War II. Now, where do you think they are? And why did that situation occur? Doesn't matter about the numbers. There's a lot of debate today as to whether the Holocaust was as severe as has been reported. It doesn't matter. If there was one person that was killed in the gas chamber, that's a serious error. Nevertheless, these individuals, some of them were children, you know, had not had a chance to express in this particular life at all. Nevertheless, as spirit and as basic selves functioning within living, breathing human beings in other times and other places, those individuals were involved in other actions similar to the Holocaust. And I refer to, and we've all been part of this, so it's not a question of us against them. It's not that at all. It's a collective that we're talking about. And we've all been through these experiences, because we have lived a good many thousands, if not millions of lives, millions of years. We didn't get where we are now as a result of a few short life expressions. So such individuals then have been part of the Crusaders, where the actions were just as inconsiderate and unkind and ruthless, where thousands of people, monks, nuns, farmers, soldiers, whatever, were killed because their belief system differed with that of the Crusaders. And as a result, they felt they had no reason to live, so they went about snuffing out the lives of as many as they could find. Well, of course, we know that as we work through the karmic pattern, we don't get away with anything. If we take an eye, and an eye is taken. That is the law within the outworking of the karmic pattern. That's why we have within our life patterns moments of joy and moments of distress. Why we have success and why we have failure. Why we move into marriages. Some marriages last for a lifetime. Others last just a few months, a few years. And individuals move on into new relationships. I know a person, for instance, who was married 6 times. And she was always very, very concerned about the fact that she was married so many times, without realizing that this was a final embodiment for her within this incarnation, and she was simply tying up loose ends, clearing out karma, balancing karma, in order to be free of this particular lifetime.
What a way to do it.
Boy, what initiation.
And when one understands that, then they can get rid of the guilt, release the guilt, let it go. All right, back to the disincarnates then. In dealing with disincarnates, it's important to be able to identify with their own belief system. For instance, Bill, Patsy are working with Indians. They're very much involved in the promotion of the welfare of the Indian movement in this country. All right, now, And they would be the first, I'm sure, to admit that the Indian belief system is very, very unique in its own right. All right. In dealing with an Indian, let's say that an Indian has had its life taken and is wandering the earth because it doesn't have a body to relate through anymore. In trying to come to terms with the spirit that maybe has wandered the earth for hundreds of thousands of years, come to this particular point where there's a light that has been attracted to for some reason or another. Well, in attempting to get that spirit released, you wouldn't say, I ask that you be released in the name of Jesus Christ at all. That would be a waste of time and effort and energy. One would then need to, in the name of the Great White Spirit, you see. That is something that the Indian can relate to. The same thing is true with a Buddhist, a person who has grown up with the Buddhist philosophy. The Christian philosophy and being released in the name of Jesus Christ would have no meaning, and vice versa. So it's very important that we realize that there are many different systems, and we have to reach to the Spirit in the name of that they're familiar with. Very important. So our basic selves have been part of many, many experiences, many expressions, and to carry those forward, time to time. In the event of an individual who is thrust out of life suddenly, for instance, there's a period of turmoil, there's a period of confusion. We have a book out on the book stand out here, Lord Kitchener Returns, a story of a man, World War II, who was thrust out of the body. And he tells in that book his experiences wandering and what life in that dimension was like outside of the physical body. There have been instances, and we know of one, instances where adepts, for instance, have gone out traveling astrally, and they have laid their bodies down, that is, they've gone into samadhi, so to speak. And perhaps they've asked someone to look over after their body to protect it while they were traveling in the other dimensions, you see, but forgot to set a timetable. Or maybe the person they left in charge got called off to other responsibilities, and somebody came along and said, well, this body is dead. It should be put on the funeral pyre, and was, and burned. The individual spirit comes back looking for the body where it left it. There's no body there. So such an individual has no home to live in, and would travel the earth then for the period of time left in the karmic pattern, that individual karmic pattern. That's what happens in the case of most suicides, for instance.
William?
Yes.
Is it not true also that on the part of the loved ones left behind, if there is heavy mourning and heavy grief, they keep that spirit earthbound?
Absolutely, and that's one of the beauties of understanding and accepting the metaphysical philosophy. Because in the metaphysical philosophy, we believe that this is only one of many, many sojourns upon the earth. In the body that we're in, we lay it down, and we pick up in another dimension. We make the transition, as we refer to it in metaphysics, make the transition from this dimension into the next dimension. And life continues. In other words, when we are alive in the physical world, we're, so to speak, dead to the spirit world. When we're alive in the spirit world, then we are dead to the physical world. But life continues to exist. There is continuity. And when we lose someone and we grieve for that individual, we are doing them a disservice. It's very much like pulling on a kite string. We want to let the spirit be released and soar. And by constantly grieving and calling that individual back, it's like pulling the kite back down, you see. We do a disservice. We need to release. Many people in metaphysics consider the act of transition as a joyful occasion. A joy in being released from the confines of the physical body and being free then to move about the universe. So it's most important. Thank you, Pete. Yes, Alan?
You might mention that not only grieving or missing that person, but hurt and anger, unresolved hurt and anger can pull that entity back.
Absolutely, absolutely. The work that we do in the Three Selves work is to work with the parents. We make sure in every session that the pattern between the individual and the parents, both parents, is balanced out. Now, if the parents are still living and there's a lot of discord, and this is a big thing with our parents, many people feel that their parents have caused them all kinds of grief, and why did they bring them in, and there's hatred and rejection and anger and all of the human emotional patterns, without realizing that we choose our parents for purpose. We choose our parents because of their strengths and their weaknesses. Strengths to build upon and the weaknesses to overcome. So it's very important that we as metaphysicians, if we don't accomplish anything else, and that is to bring a pattern of balance into our relationship with our parents as much as possible. Now, we can't do the work for the other person. Remember that our basic selves have a contact with each other. Our basic selves this evening are all in communication with each other. And if there's someone within this room, for instance, that you've had a negative karmic relationship with in another lifetime, and were drawn here this evening and met for the first time in this lifetime, you might have experienced an instantaneous feeling of dislike or disturbance when you came in contact with the other person. That means that the basic, and the opposite is true too. That means that the basic selves were instantaneously in touch with each other and recognized one another from another lifetime. Well, now if that's a serious karmic pattern, then you're locked into that pattern from this time forward. The opposite is true, and that's how you all got together with your mates, believe it or not. You know that, Walter?
Sure.
That's true. That is absolutely true.
Sure.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So there's unfinished business to take care of. The basic selves draw partners together, and then you're locked into that pattern from that moment on. So, and you either will succeed in working through the pattern, or you won't. And if you don't,
Do you have any other alternatives?
you'll have an opportunity to come back and do it again if it is an important pattern. But the important thing that I want to bring out for those of you who are partnered, if you will realize that your subconscious mind, your basic selves, are in touch with the other person's basic self, perhaps you can't relate as well as you'd like to relate on the conscious level with that other individual, but you can work through your basic self. You can ask your basic self to communicate in a better fashion with the other person's basic self. Now, we must keep in mind that we don't have the right to send our basic selves out to do harm or to control the other person's basic self, because that's against the spiritual law. So we can't do that. But we must always act in accordance with that is right action, so as not to control, because to control is surely to buy ourselves a return trip, you see. All right. Have you any questions at this point? And then we're going to move to EC and let him have the rest of the evening to work
Are you going to
with us.
explain any of the chart?
Well, for the benefit of those of you who are not familiar with the chart, and those of you that are thoroughly familiar with it, I ask you to indulge in this. The chart is laid out in the fashion that it's really our plan. Our higher self, which lodges itself above the head, 4 or 5 inches above the head, and is our link to the Creator, to the God Source. And the consciousness, and the consciousness is that level of consciousness that we are communicating with now. And the basic consciousness, which is our subconscious mind, form the trinity of consciousness. And the work of the fellowship is to bring about an understanding and to bring about an integration of those 3 levels of consciousness. The one thing that we want to do is to realize that within our basic self and our high self, we not only have helpers, but we have a team within that will work toward bringing about the highest possible level of accomplishment within this lifetime. And we've chosen to be in the body that we're in now because that's where we need to learn the lessons. All right. Karmic pattern is designed by the high self and the master teacher. The high self has programmed into it both positive and negative aspects, meaning memory patterns that are lodged in the book of life or the Akashic record file. The spirit is the activator and the motivator. We've been talking about spirit here this evening and disincarnate spirits. The spirit is very powerful. There are many levels of accomplishment within the spirits of the spirit world. We're all motivated by a spirit. Not to be likened unto the soul. The spirit and the soul are different. And of course, people oftentimes are confused about the two. The soul resides within the etheric body, within the heart chakra. And the soul is that gives us life and light. The purpose of all life upon the earth is to increase the awareness and the light of the soul. Because the soul has an innate desire to return back to the Godhead. And when its soulic awareness, its light accomplishment becomes great enough, then it will reunite. Even the most negative, evil individuals will one day unite with the Godhead. Now remember, I'm not talking about the spirit. It's very important to realize also that there's no such thing as the dark night of the soul. The soul that resides within each one of us never takes on any negative action, no matter how negative or evil it is. Only the basic self takes on that pattern. Okay. All right, so the karmic pattern then releases in cycles to the subconscious or subjective mind, or what we call the basic self. Remember I told you that the basic self had lots of free will. The free will to accept the karmic pattern or reject it. The free will to accept the consciousness, and that means the body, and you'd be surprised how many basic selves are squared off against the physical bodies that they're within. The basic self has the right to reject the high self and to reject the creative source, to reject the Godhead within the free will. And there are many roads leading to Rome. Remember that. All right. So the basic self and the consciousness have the challenge of working through the karmic lessons. The high self serves as that level that guides and directs. The master teacher, which was part of bringing forth the Akashic record file into the karmic pattern, also assists. And remember that our parents are chosen for us, again, for their strengths and their weaknesses. And we are then, within the environment, within the life that we build, dependent upon the parents in the formative years to establish that environmental pattern for us. Many, many individuals reject their parents for one reason or another. Many parents reject their children for one reason or another. Many fathers will reject their daughters or their sons for one reason or another. Again, I'm repeating myself, but oftentimes the fathers and the mothers, particularly in some of the tribes, are most insistent that the firstborn child come in as a male. Well, if the high self has other plans and brings forth a female, there is instantaneous rejection, oftentimes, and this is far more serious a problem than most anybody has any reason to believe. Will reject the infant, the youngster, at the point of conception. So throughout the whole 9-month prenatal period, the basic self is being rejected by one parent or both. So, of course, the proper attitude would be to accept with joy whichever type of child comes through, whether it be a male or a female. All right? Now, the basic self has many responsibilities. If there are two, masculine and feminine, then they will share these responsibilities in the lower right-hand corner. If there's only one, then that one basic self must take care of those responsibilities depending upon its ability to do so, its understanding of the responsibility of caring for those needs, and within its free will. If a basic self, for instance, squares off against a physical body, that physical body is in trouble. And many health patterns are caused as a result of a basic self that is squared off against the consciousness. Now, you see on the middle of the chart here, between the levels of consciousness, obsession and possession. Obsessions are thought forms that we create. Our mind is all powerful. And the day will come when we will understand that most all disease is that we have created, if not in this lifetime, in another lifetime. The mind's very powerful, and the basic self and the conscious mind have the ability to bring about healing if we only understand the law. And that's what most of us are working for, is to understand how that works. Perhaps we can ask some questions about that this evening. But if we consciously create negative thought forms, then these negative thought forms will become obsessive, and they cause great stress to the basic self, to the consciousness. The stress is that the basic self is not able to take care of its responsibilities, and a situation then deteriorates rather rapidly, and of course the karmic pattern's cut off here. Possessions are disincarnate spirits or entities that enter into our trinity of consciousness as a result of a chain of events that we consciously set into motion by allowing, through negative thought patterns, that to occur. Upon transition, the basic self, the lessons of the basic self or selves, is added to the awareness of the high self, added in the Akashic record file as a positive or a negative quality, meaning accomplishment or lack of accomplishment. The soul then is increased in its light awareness by the amount of the lessons that we have learned. All right? The negative aspects of the basic self return back to the inner planes, to the repository, and remain there until such a time as the high self calls us back into a new embodiment to work out those remaining problems or concerns or attitudes or emotions or whatever, until such a time as the basic self has learned all that it needed to learn when it came into the earth. And then the embodiment is not only over, but so is the incarnation. All right, we'll take a couple of questions. Yes, Sharon.
Getting back to the possession and obsession, is it always the conscious self that brings about the opening for the possession, or can it be within the karmic plan and the basic selves and the high self bring that about? It's always the conscious mind that does that?
All right, there are some possessive actions that are karmic in origin. In other words, let us put it this way. If our basic selves have been part of controlling another individual in another lifetime and causing a possession to be brought about, then our higher self will allow a possession to come in and to take over in order to teach the basic self a lesson. So in some cases, it's the high self that will allow a possession to enter, but that is not usually the case. Usually a possession enters as a result of a chain of events that start with consciousness. Yes?
So if the possession is karmically correct, then that would be one that could not be exorcised.
That's exactly
Is that
right. That's exactly right. We had a situation recently. This is a fascinating case. I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you about it. This man was a priest in the Hare Krishna movement. A very beautiful human being, okay? A tremendous physical pain. He came out here to Los Angeles as a result of a circuitous route, heard about us, and came out here to have that pain, and what he felt was that possession that he felt had lodged itself in the small of his back, exorcised. And I told him in the very beginning that in all probability we could not exorcise that entity. Not that we cannot do it, but if it was not karmically correct for it to occur, we would not be allowed to do it. Okay? The very first thing that Bella said when she attuned herself to his vibration was, we're not going to be able to release that entity from you. Well, now there was a tremendous amount of disappointment, you can imagine, because he was under tremendous pain. He was dying. There's no question about it. He was dying. Well, we've learned a tremendous lesson as a result of this. So that's why I prepared him for it, because when people travel across the country in the hopes that something can be exorcised, if you can't do it, they must be prepared for the fact that there is that possibility. It's like a person goes to a hospital and has an operation. You know, the doctor will say, well, I'll do the very best I can to bring you through this, but there's always the possibility that you won't survive it. All right, so anyway, we taught him how to handle that possession, that he had created that some many years ago. We didn't know at that time how long ago. And taught him how to go through the forgiveness process, which would ultimately lead toward his releasing or having that entity released. Okay? All right, so he goes back home. He goes home. And he begins to check around, and he finds a group in New York that thought they could exorcise it. Okay? So he went to them, and they did exorcise him of the entity. So he called, and he was very happy, very joyous, and I was glad for him. The next day he called, very distressed, and said that at the stroke of midnight, in through an open window came this loud noise, and the entity was back and lodged itself in the middle of his back, or the small of his back. So the pain was back, okay? So he was not free of the entity. Now, it's a long story, and it took a long time to get to this point, but some 5,000 years prior to that, he, as a little boy, was responsible for having brought about the death of a king. Through a dragon. He had conjured up this dragon, and it was all designed to fulfill prophecy. He'd conjured up this dragon with this saw blade bill, sent it to the king, and the king died, and it lodged in the center of the back of the king. Okay? Now, and this again is all part of the Hare Krishna philosophy. So he had to go back to the research books and find out if there was such an occurrence that did in fact occur, and he found it did. Now he then was the little boy that did that. So he had to decreate the situation before he could be free of it. He did. He was able to do his homework, went through the forgiveness routine, and brought about peace with that entity, and was released from that tremendous pain that he had in his back. So it's not always possible, Sharon, to release an entity just because one wants to have it released.
I have a question on the obsession also. The obsession, is that always that person's creation of thought forms, or can it be someone else's creation of thought forms that have attached itself to you?
Okay, there's a difference. Mostly it is our own creation. When we create a thought form, let us say we create a thought form of hatred towards someone. We continue to put energy behind that thought form. Then we build what is called an artificial entity, the obsession, that can lead us and go out in search of the other individual and cause harm to the other individual. Now that in essence is what a curse is. You see, a curse action. Okay? So, if we are cursed, and many people are, obviously it's the result of something that has occurred on someone else's part and is sending that curse action to us that does indeed enter into this area and simply adds to what is already there. Yes.
To what we have created,
To what we have created,
the obsession that we have created, the other comes in and adds to
and
that?
simply adds to that. Now the same thing is true with drugs and alcohol. If we utilize drugs and alcohol, continue to do so on the conscious level, then we create a chain of events, which means that we create an obsession around the basic self, and it can't do its homework, it cannot take care of its responsibilities, meaning the psychic doors are wide open and in comes a disincarnate entity that's traveling around or hovering around the individual.
And one that likes alcohol.
And one that likes alcohol or one that likes drugs or whatever.
So it sets up the obsession first,
Sets up
and
its...
then the possession comes in.
See, remember this. The responsibility for whatever occurs comes right back to us. It comes back to us. That's why we must be ever so careful of the thoughts that we create.
It's like a wheel.
It's like a wheel. Yes.
It's subconscious level and causes our unconscious becoming of the obsession of possession. In other words, the entire thing is involved with our subconscious memory. It's kind of powerful when you stop and think that in some way you have created something thousands of years ago as this man and bring it in and consciously don't know what to do with it. And just someone can help you to understand
And time,
where it began.
and time means nothing. We measure time, but in spirit there is no time. See? All right, Bruce?
When the soul makes the transformation or transition back to the Godhead, what happens with spirit, thyself?
All right, when that... Okay.
That's the question that we answered at the easy time.
All right, now, Bruce, we must differentiate between three areas. Remember, we're all involved in a master incarnation. Okay, we're involved in an incarnation, which has within it many, many, many embodiments, okay? So we've got then the transition that leads to another embodiment. When we've completed all the embodiments within incarnation, then we have got a culmination of a karmic, of an incarnation, is what I'm saying, the master plan, okay? Now, whether or not the soul at that point is reunited back with the Godhead, we'll need to ask EC about that. But it would not be reunited until a specific time. Maybe it would go through many, many incarnations, consisting of many embodiments. Sometimes it's male, sometimes it's female. All right, now to answer your question. At the end of a transition, as far as an embodiment's concerned, the basic self is in the process of evolving and evolving and evolving until such a time as it becomes worthy of becoming a high self. Okay? That is the normal evolution of a basic self, is to ultimately become a high self. The high self becomes a higher and higher and higher level of high self-awareness. Okay? All right. Now that only occurs at the culmination of an incarnation, which means then that it takes all those many embodiments to get the basic self ready so that it is prepared to come back into another incarnation having no connection to what has occurred before, no connection to the spirit or the soul or the high self that has been his traveling partners, let us say. You understand? Okay? So it becomes a new high self, taking on brand new basic selves, a brand new soul into the earth. Not necessarily a new soul, but a new soul insofar as earth-type experience is concerned. You understand that? Okay. The spirit then, of course, will move off into the level of the spirit world to await recall by some level of the hierarchy into new patterns. You see? Think of it in terms of a piece of ore or raw gem that is taken out of the earth. And through a series of polishing, that becomes a beautiful gem. Once it becomes a beautiful gem, there's nothing more to do with it except to enjoy it, so on. So it is with the basic selves, once it has reached that level of accomplishment.